Hello, welcome. We are back on the ship good praxis. We are now visiting our member of our crew, Deborah Giustini, who is based at the Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha. Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Natalia. It's really nice to meet you over here. Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
it's very nice to have you with us. And please, to our viewers, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Okay, yes. So, as you said, I'm actually in Doha and I work at HBKU as an assistant professor in the social sciences. I'm specializing in intercultural communication for business management and organizations. And I'm also based as a research fellow at KU Leuven, so the University of Leuven in Antwerp, in Belgium, in the translation studies research unit. And more specifically, I do research on simultaneous translation, so on interpreting. And of course, I'm a practice theory enthusiast. And broadly speaking, I do research on issues of expertise, power, and inequalities in knowledge-intensive and fastly digitalizing settings. And I have a particular inclination to study working practices within the language industry. This is also because on the side, I investigate matters of cross-cultural and cross-linguistic communication in and beyond organizations. And also because I have myself a dual background. I was working in the language industry before starting my academic career. So I suppose that this makes of me a practitioner and a researcher. So I'm something like a practice searcher.
This all sounds very interesting. I will let our pirate Nina to dig deeper into this.
Yes, so maybe you could tell us a bit more about the practice theory side of things. So, where and how did you first encounter practice theory?
Absolutely. So I remember that I first encountered practice theory around 10 years ago when I was doing my PhD at the University of Manchester. And at the time, my project was exploring practices of invisible and technologically mediated labor within the language industry. And I remember that I was flirting particularly with Bourdieu's conceptual apparatus, but I was really struggling at the time to find a theoretical approach that would be able to really account for what I was experiencing on the field. I was doing ethnography. I was observing this very dynamic industry subject to exceptionally strong pushes towards digitalization, but also very distinct understandings of what counted as expert work. And I really needed a tool to get to such work, how it was more dynamically accomplished on the ground, I would say, how it was materially mediated, but also how it intersected with other types of work, with other groups of practitioners. And my supervisor understood what I needed. And I remember very, very clearly the one day she suggested me these two books. So this is quite well known, but also Davide Niccolini's book about practice work and organizations. And I was absolutely hooked from the very first reading. And from there, I started exploring how studies of work and organizations in particular had developed this practice-based approach, including to socio-materiality. So that was my start. That's how I fell in love with practice theory.
That's very, very interesting. So, I mean, you touched on that a little bit, but could you maybe tell us a bit more what kind of attracted you to practice theory, maybe compared to other theories, and what still attracts you to it?
Sure. I like how it approaches social reality as a fluid, ongoing, and dynamic endeavor through the concept of practice itself. So this idea of the ing, so the doing, the working, the organizing, the digitalizing, that really resonates with what I do and what I see on the field. And I think it gives me the tools needed to account for how working life in the settings I explore function in terms of routines, in terms of structure, regimes of activity, also the relationalities among people and objects. But at the same time, it allows me to look for the messiness, for the creation, and for the improvisation. And I just found it very, very tenable. And I think that there is such great beauty in having the conceptual toolkit needed to explore all social phenomena in terms of innovative order, but also disorder. And then I found that other people were doing practice-based work, also within the translation communication studies community, as well as in organization studies, of course, and in sociology, where my background originally is from. And I found that, to be a really thriving community. And so that's what really attracted me to practice, both, both the content, both the ontology and the people working with and on it.
Wow, what a love letter to practice theory. And you've been talking a little bit about sort of the main issues that you're dealing with, your main sort of ideas. Maybe you could elaborate on that a bit more. So you were talking about expertise and power, but also translation and working practices. Maybe you could just tell us a bit more about the main ideas that you're working with.
Yeah. So there's a couple of research lines and ideas that I'm exploring at the moment. So I'm working particularly with the concept of connecting and accumulating practices. So I took much inspiration from Elizabeth's latest work and how they give way to larger phenomena, particularly within work and occupations, as well as in matters of mediated communication. So within translation, interpreting, and so forth. The first idea I've been playing with and I'm trying to develop in a paper is to use practice theory to conceptualize a system of how jobs and occupations connect, how they interrelate and compete, and so forth in particular industries. So at the moment, I've re-entered the language industry as a field site because after COVID-19, the setting has very strongly digitalized. It has become a very virtual market. And so I'm trying to understand how these aspects occur. And I think here the plasticity of practices here is really helping me to see how work connects across different spheres and through different forms of material and human performativity. And this particular idea also sprouted from conversations I've had at the European Colloquium for Organization Studies earlier on this summer. So once again, I'm very grateful for having a practice theory community around so that I could orient better the debate. And then the second idea, which is very much in the making, but I also find it very socially engaging, is exploring how the accumulation of practices can give way to phenomena including inequality and marginalizations. So concretely, I'm trying to explore this by writing about the new streamlined asylum process in the UK, which has sidelined institutional practices of language mediation, language advocacy, and interpreting for asylum seekers. So I'm trying to see how, putting aside these linguistic and cultural practices in favor of machine translation or informal language assistance is actually adding to the cultural and linguistic inequalities that already characterize a very bureaucratized and often dehumanized setting.
Wow, that's super interesting and fascinating. And with that, I think I'll pass on to Elizabeth.
Yeah, so from my back, you can tell that I'm pretending to be an anthropologist, exploring the tribes of practice theory amongst others. So I'm curious because you've mentioned quite a few tribes already, the linguistics tribe, kind of digital translation, sociology, practice theory. So do you feel like you belong to any one of these or many of these? Where are you in terms of tribe membership?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's not the first time that I'm asked this. I would say that I'm at the institutions I'm based at, I'm the only one working with practices. So I'm very much of a lone wolf in this sense. But I also think that the broader practice theory community has really allowed me to join forces with colleagues. For instance, in the translation and communication studies community, I've worked with a colleague and using practice theory as a methodological sensitizing device. We delved into theoretical musings about, time, spatial, and cultural elements, for instance, of language-based work. And I think there's a lot of work which is done now for practice-based sensitivity in the field. And it's really interesting to see how well received the approach is. There has been a practice theoretical analysis of the translation market, for instance, and I've also seen at summer schools that I participate with. For instance, we have a summer school at the Center for Translation Studies at KU Leuven, and I've been coaching students on how to work with ideas of practice. So I see that there's a legacy in the field developing. And I'm also very much in touch with the social sciences, I would say mostly the organization studies community. Recently, I've been collaborating with David and Nicolini on how to use practice theory within ethnographic work, but also being part of larger initiatives. So the practice theory summer school at Warwick Business School, my participation at EGOS last year, and actually with two colleagues. So my colleagues Olivier Bertord and another crew member, so Ignace. We are co-leading a sub-theme on space and time in practice-based accounts of organizing in Milan at EGOS in 2024. So I would say that although I do not have kind of a practice-based lab or a tribe immediately around me, I still feel very grateful for these opportunities. And perhaps I will have, I will be in a practice-based lab one day.
Yeah. So you've talked quite a few times about practice theory as a tool and as a device and as a method. And in a way, it sounds like your tribe membership, it sort of mirrors that. In other words, you're using practice theory, but you don't see yourself as somehow contributing to it. Is that, I mean, that's, of course, it's bound to go both ways. That's going to be a grey area. But how do you see these kinds of issues, language, translation, contribute? Is it showing up new things that practice theorists should think about?
Yes, it's absolutely shaping up new things, for instance, about how practice theory can think more about the role of discourse, language, interaction, so developing towards that direction, but also seeing how particular sets of practices may contribute to new forms of normativity, new forms of teleaffectivity. So I think there's a lot there that can cross-fertilize the two fields, or more than them. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. There's loads more to talk about, but we should be coming to an end. So my next question is: it would be really nice to have a souvenir from you to take with us on our journey. And so I don't know what you've prepared, but I think you have got something to give us.
Yes, I've got something to give you. So it's a magnet. I don't know if you can't really see it.
Yeah,
so Belgian fries, which are very, very famous. So there's this internal fight between the French and the Belgians about who was invented it, so the fries. So I'm just giving these to you to bring you on your next pod call.
Great. I mean, of course, we constantly confront international issues on this boat, so that's very, very relevant for us. And I think, what else we've got to eat? We haven't got a lot to eat on the boat. We've had some bread, but some chips would be really nice. That's great. Thanks. And then where would you like us to go next? Have you found somebody else on the map that we should visit?
Yes, I found someone on the map, and perhaps I'd like to direct the ship towards a longer journey this time and travel to Japan. So Japan has been one of my field sites in the past, so I'm very fond of seeing how the practice theory community is developing there. So I'd like to propose Toshiro Hirota from Kansai University as the next port call.
Great, we'll get him on the list. And thank you so much for allowing us to visit. So we'll see you again soon.
See you soon, and thanks for the nice chat.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you.